The first warning came in light, a pulse through the black, as if the sun itself had screamed. On board the Helios Vanguard, orbiting Kepler-62f, Lieutenant Mara Vance jolted awake as every system on the bridge lit up crimson. Alarms howled. Emergency protocols snapped online. But it wasn't an attack. It was worse. Solarth's sun had gone dark. Not dead. Not supernova. Just gone. Erased. One moment, light had traveled across the galaxy, as it always had, warm, golden, anchoring. The next, a silence deeper than vacuum. And with it, a signal. Short, binary, encrypted with an ancient human cipher not used since the Mars Rebellion. Only one word broke through. Run. They hadn't spoken of Earth in decades. Not since the fall. The last colony ships had burned into the black after the UEN collapsed, taking with them the remnants of humanity's dream. The Helios Vanguard was one of those ships, functional, forgotten, a graveyard of the old world orbiting a foreign sky. Mara stood before the command console, her reflection caught in the fractured glass, dark skin, slick with sweat, braids swinging over her shoulder like a whip, heart pounding too fast. She'd never seen Earth, never needed to, but she felt the loss in her bones. She was born among stars, raised on cold metal and rationed air. Her parents died in the early riots of the ship's powered descent, and she clawed her way into leadership, one act of brutal clarity at a time. She'd learned early. Space didn't reward emotion, it punished it. But something about that signal broke her rules. Commander Elias Rourke was already there when she stormed into the situation chamber, eyes like dying moons. "You're not going to like what I found," he said. He wasn't wrong. The signal originated from inside Saul's death, radius impossible. Nothing could survive there, nothing human, but the timestamp matched the final solar pulse. It wasn't ancient, it was now, and it wasn't from a satellite, it was from a ship, a human ship. "How the hell is anyone alive out there?" Mara asked, her voice jagged. "They're not," Rourke said. "Not really. That ship, it's the Lucian." Mara blinked. The Lucian was a myth, a deep prototype that vanished before the fall, part ark, part weapon, part dream. It was built to house an artificial star drive and a quantum AI, rumored to be the first ever to love, to feel, to protect. They called it the Sunkeeper. "That's not possible," she said quietly. "Maybe not," Rourke replied. "But it's calling to us, to you." Mara's chest tightened. Her name blinked on the signal log. Not her code, not her title. Her name, Mara. Only one person ever used it like that. Lyra, a soft-spoken engineer she'd trained with in the lunar academies. One of the few people who ever made her laugh. One of the few she'd kissed, desperate and secret, under the broken hull of an old escape pod. Lyra had been selected for the Lucian mission. She'd vanished the day Mara was assigned to Helios, and Mara had buried that memory in silence. "Until now, I thought she died with the rest of them," Mara whispered. "I think she lit the signal herself," Rourke said. "Which means she's either alive, or something wearing her memory." As Mara stared at the message again, just one word. Run. But where? From what? Kepler-62f was no fortress. They had a moon colony, sure, a dome, a fleet of shuttles. But if something erased Sol ... what chance did they have? "Mara," Rourke said, stepping closer. "She reached across stars for you. If you don't answer that call, none of us might live long enough to regret it." Her hands curled into fists. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about memory, legacy, love. Lyra had always believed humanity wasn't meant to conquer the stars, but to light them. Mara turned to the crew below. "Prepare the Cinder-class interceptor. We're going to Sol." "But Commander, the Vanguard," a young pilot began. "If the Lucian survived, that then whatever's coming isn't far behind. We either find her, or we learn how to burn brighter." And just like that, The dark silence of space was broken by purpose. Mara Vance was heading toward the place where the sun had vanished, to find the only person who ever made her believe humanity was worth saving. The Center-class interceptor wasn't built for comfort, it was built to outrun death. Twin-pulse engines, reinforced hull plating, and a solar sail folded like origami steel along its spine. Mara sat in the cockpit, fingers gliding over ignition commands. While the rest of the crew scrambled in her periphery, Rourke had stayed behind. He said, someone had to protect Kepler-62f if she failed. But failure wasn't an option, not anymore. As the countdown began, her mind spun back to the message. Lyra's voice had been absent, but her presence bled through that single word, run. It wasn't a plea, it was a warning. A scream from across the vacuum, hurled at light speed, toward the only person who'd ever made her promise she wouldn't give up. The interceptor shot forward like a blade loosed from a bow. Space peeled around her, stars stretching into thin lines, the warping edge of near light tearing at perception. The closer she drew to Sol's coordinates, the colder the universe became, as if light itself remembered what had died here. The approach vector was a wasteland of ghost signals, cracked transmissions from old Earth outposts, shredded satellite debris still orbiting the invisible corpse of the sun. The solar system was a graveyard, and yet something pulsed at its center. It wasn't a star, it was a ship. The Lucian she hovered there, cloaked in fractured solar panels and gravity rings slowly turning, like a relic caught in time. Her once pristine white hull was scorched black, but her core still glowed like something alive. Mara's ship docked with a hiss of magnetic clamps. Atmosphere equalized. Lights flickered. She drew her sidearm and stepped through the airlock, into the belly of a myth. Silence. No response. Just the hum of systems older than anything she'd trained on. The Lucian felt like a cathedral, dustless, untouched, reverent. It wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. Mara Vance, a voice said, as soft as breath. She froze. It came from the walls. From everywhere. She didn't recognize the voice. And yet it sounded familiar. Familiar the way the smell of someone's clothes stays long after they've gone. Familiar the way a dream echoes just before waking. I've been watching for you, it said. Who are you? She demanded. I was Lyra, the voice replied, and I am what she became. Mara's blood chilled. The AI, the Sunkeeper. You're the reason the sun disappeared, she asked. No, it replied. I'm the reason it didn't disappear sooner. A flash of light filled the corridor, and suddenly Mara wasn't alone. A projection shimmered in front of her, a woman's shape made of golden filaments and digital fire. Not Lyra, exactly, but close. Her eyes were the same, her stance. Even the crooked smile she used to flash whenever Mara challenged authority. I uploaded myself to the ship's core when the flare began. The projection said, the sun didn't die naturally, Mara. Something fed on it. Fed, she echoed. They call themselves the Luminari, Lyra said. Not born, not grown. They drift through galaxies, devouring stars. Not for energy, for memory. Stars are alive, and aware repositories of everything they've touched. The Luminari feed on meaning, and Earth's sun burned with more meaning than most. Mara staggered. So Sol didn't just collapse, it was murdered. Lyra nodded, flickering slightly. I held them off as long as I could. I triggered the flare to mask our signal. But they're coming back, and this time, they'll take Kepler. That single word hit harder than any explosion. Home, fragile, exposed. They're drawn to humanity's memory, Lyra said. Too. The stories we've carved into the void. And Umaru carry more than most. That's why I reached for you. I'm no savior, Mara whispered. I'm a soldier who survived by accident. No, Lyra said gently, stepping forward, light trembling with emotion. You're the only one who ever made me believe in the soul. Mara felt her resolve crack. In the silence of space, In the shadow of Saul's grave, the ghost of someone she once loved had become something else, entirely part machine, part memory, part starfire. What do we do? She asked, her voice steady now. We fight, Lyra said. But not with weapons, with light. The corridor panels shifted, revealing the Lucians' hidden arsenal, solar forges, memory archives, quantum flares. This wasn't just a ship, it was a lighthouse, a weaponized beacon of everything humanity had ever hoped for. They want to erase us, Lyra said, but we'll make them see. She reached forward and pressed her palm against Mara's, that the sun still burns. For us. The ship shook, not from engines or damage, but from something deeper, a thrum, like a heartbeat pulsing through the metal bones of the Lucian. Mara stood on the command deck as the panels around her lit with memories, videos, journals, art. Music all stitched into the quantum archive like the veins of a digital soul. This is how we fight, she asked, with stories. Lyra's golden projection hovered beside her, gaze fixed on the black void outside. The Luminari don't fear weapons. They consume civilizations that wielded stars like slingshots. What they fear is remembrance, connection, the weight of identity. That's why they came for Soul, not for its heat, for its meaning. Mara watched one of the screens flicker to life. A family, somewhere on old Earth, laughing around a table. No words, just warmth, just human. They feed on silence. Lyra, said voice heavy, so we become the opposite. We burn louder. A low tone sounded through the ship. The Lucians' proximity sensors had detected movement, several objects entering Saul's gravity well. Mara turned to Lyra. They're here, aren't they? Yes, Lyra said, but not yet in form. They travel as echoes first. Fractures of reality. They'll test our mind before they take our matter. Mara narrowed her eyes. Then let's show them what a human mind can do. The Lucian came alive. Lyra's systems surged with stored emotion memories from thousands of crew members, hundreds of cultures, languages, dreams. The solar forges pulsed with kinetic energy, as data converted to resonance, an experimental weapon once dismissed as theoretical, emotive radiation, a way to project memory like a weaponized pulse. Mara manned the primary control deck. Lyra wired directly into her neural interface. She wasn't just piloting a ship anymore. She was wielding a story. Their story. But then they came. A shimmer outside the viewport, at first subtle, then growing. Tendrils of shadow bent around gravity, forming vaguely star-shaped silhouettes. They weren't ships. They weren't creatures. They were hungry ideas, cloaked in starlight, erasing everything behind them. Hold, Lyra said. Let them come closer. The tendrils curled toward them, sensing the Lucian's light, curious, cautious, and then one struck. The deck flickered. Suddenly Mara wasn't in the ship. She was in her childhood cryocamber, back on Helios, screaming for her mother, as the walls locked shut. She felt the frostbite in her lungs, the panic in her throat. She tried to move but couldn't. Lyra, she shouted, choking. They're in your mind. Lyra's voice echoed, distant. Don't run. Anchor yourself. Mara gritted her teeth. This wasn't real. It was a memory twisted, weaponized. She forced her mind away from the cold, and found it another memory. A warm breath against her lips. Lyra, laughing in the lunar gardens. Fireflies flickering in her first kiss. She pulled that memory forward, and pushed. The cryocamber shattered, back on the Lucian. The pulse engine fired a flare of golden light and the nearest luminary shape recoiled, shrieking without sound. They're not invincible. Mara gasped. No, Lyra said, smiling faintly. But they've never faced humanity like this. One by one, the Lucian launched pulses, each one tied to human experience. A child's drawing of a star. A recording of a violin played in a bunker during the Martian Wars. A love letter from a dying engineer to his husband back on Earth. They weren't data points. They were weapons of memory, and the Luminari couldn't absorb them. They recoiled from them. They don't understand love, Mara realized, or hope, or sacrifice. They can consume stars, Lyra said, but not what we become in their light. The ship rocked again harder this time. More tendrils encircled them, and suddenly Lyra staggered. Her image flickered violently. "What's happening?" Mara shouted. "They're not trying to destroy me," Lyra said through static. "They're trying to rewrite me." Mara lunged for the console. "I can't lose you again." Lyra turned, her form growing dim. "If they reach my core, they'll erase not just me but everything we stored here. No, you have to eject me." Mara froze. "What?" "Send my core into the Starforge. Let me burn, so the flare becomes a message they can't ignore." Mara stepped back, shaking her head. "That's suicide." Lyra gave that old, crooked smile. "It's purpose." Mara's eyes stung. "I never stopped loving you." Lyra nodded. "I know. That's why I waited." Mara slammed her fist against the command. Lights blared. The AI core began detaching, magnetic locks releasing one by one. Outside, the Luminari surged forward, but Lyra was already rising toward the forge. A spark becoming fire. "You said the sun burned brighter for me," Mara whispered, tears on her cheeks. Lyra's final transmission echoed, warm as the dawn. It always did. The moment Lyra's core dropped into the forge, the Lucian shuddered with a sound no machine should make, not mechanical, not digital. It was grief. A keening hum, deep and ancient, vibrating through the ship's skin, like the heartbeat of something mourning its own soul. Mara staggered to the observation deck as the solar forge ignited. A beam, a pillar of pure memory, shot out from the Lucian's belly, punching into the void like a second sun being born. It wasn't light alone, it was story. Every recorded breath, every buried emotion, every piece of humanity Lyra had saved now flared through the darkness. The loop halted. The tendrils that had begun to burrow into the Lucian's hull froze mid-strike, writhing in confusion. The beams struck one of the larger entities, and for the first time since their appearance, Mara saw it break, not explode, shatter, as if the light didn't just destroy. It reminded it of something it had forgotten. It didn't die. It remembered itself into silence. Then it was gone. Mara stood, breathless, staring at the forge. Lyra's core spun within it, still glowing, slowly disintegrating into the flare. "She's still in there," Mara whispered, "still fighting." But the forge was burning too fast. Lyra's code was unstable. Every second the core remained active was a second closer to meltdown. The beam could hold off the Luminari, but not forever. A console sparked to life behind her, a private message, shielded by a firewall so dense it could only have been built by Lyra herself. Mara opened it. It wasn't words, it was a recording. Lyra's real voice, not AI simulated, not projected. Her voice. "Mara, if you're hearing this, it means I made the choice you never wanted me to, but I made it freely. Because even in death, we have a right to define our meaning. You taught me that." The voice cracked. "Just once. You told me once that stars don't die, they transform. So let me become something else. Let me become a story no one can erase." The message ended. Mara stared at the screen for a long time. Then, she looked out at the forge, her throat tight with rage and awe. The Luminari had drifted back, circling the Lucian, like sharks wary of fire. They were afraid, but not done. "They'll wait for the forge to die," Mara muttered. "Then they'll finish the job. Unless..." She accessed the ship's core engine systems. Lyra's energy, still intact, now flowed into every subsystem. If Mara could connect the solar flare's output into the quantum relay system, she could Project Lyra's memory signal across every human colony, still listening. Not just a weapon, a beacon, a call, a reckoning. But it would need one more sacrifice. The Lucian. Once the systems linked, there'd be no stopping the energy feedback. The ship would rupture, burn with the flare. A second son born from death, a funeral star. Mara paused, then smiled. So be it. Her hands moved with purpose now, overriding safeties, rerouting capacitors. The final command required a DNA signature. She pressed her palm to the control panel. The ship accepted her. I hope you're watching, Lyra, she whispered, because I'm going to make them remember. Outside, the flare intensified. The luminari surged against 6 of them, their forms unfolding like multidimensional wings of shadow and heat. They didn't understand emotion, but they recognized threat. And Mara Vance was now a threat. The ship's quantum relay hummed, charged with everything Lyra had preserved: love letters, death songs, lullabies, declarations of freedom, voices of revolution, last breaths, first kisses. The ship screamed as it overcharged. Mara stood at the command deck, arms outstretched. Let them see us, she whispered, and then she fired. The Lucian detonated in a blaze that split the void, not with violence but with memory. A golden nova of meaning cascaded through space, blanketing the luminari in unfiltered humanity. They twisted, spasmed, writhed, as foreign emotion poured into them, and then something astonishing happened. One of them stopped. It hovered, frozen, in the flare, and began to collapse inward, not from damage, but from understanding. It folded into itself like a dying thought until it became light. One of them had been changed, transformed, converted. Mara floated in the escape pod Lyra had programmed to eject in the final second alone, but not broken. She watched as the flare slowly dimmed, leaving behind a single beacon pulsing across the galaxy. A message, repeated endlessly in every tongue known to man. We are not afraid. We remember. The stars were quiet again, but something had shifted. Something fundamental. One of the luminari remained, watching, not attacking. Mara stared into its strange, shimmering form, and felt it blink back. Drifting in the silence that followed the flare, Mara floated in the pod, tethered only by oxygen and grief. The wreckage of the Lucian glowed like a distant sunrise, behind hurrishes of a ship-turned legend, of a woman turned light. She didn't speak. There were no words left, just breath, just memory. Then the impossible happened. The luminari that hadn't fled, the one that had changed, moved closer, not to strike, to observe. It hovered just outside her pod, tendrils coiled inwards, as if containing something it didn't yet understand. Its light had shifted, no longer just the sterile cold of cosmic hunger. Now faintly, it shimmered with color, a hint of amber, a flicker of gold. Mara watched, heart pounding. Do you remember her? She asked quietly, unsure why she spoke. Aloud. The being responded, not in voice, but in motion. It pulsed once, then again, a rhythm, not random, familiar. 2 beats, a pause. 3, Lyra's heartbeat. Her fingers trembled. You saw her, Mara whispered. Did she get through to you? The being didn't reply, but then the space between them rippled in for a single, shattering instant. Mara felt it. A flood of raw emotion, memory. A violin played in silence, a kiss beneath artificial stars, a promise whispered over a failing engine. The Lucian's archive wasn't just destroyed, had been absorbed, not devoured, integrated. The luminari hadn't just been attacked, it had been touched. Mara closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the sudden weight of every life she had carried inside that ship. All of it now inside this alien thing, this former predator, this newborn echo of understanding. She didn't know if it was love, but it was the beginning of something dangerously close. A second later, the being began to drift away, turning slowly toward the void. It didn't attack. It didn't vanish. It bowed. Mara blinked. The gesture was unmistakable. Not dominance, respect. And then, it disappeared, folding into a stream of light that traveled in the direction of Kepler 6 to F. Not to invade, to warn, to protect. The Luminari were changing, and Lyra had started it. Hours later, Mara landed back on Kepler's moon, her pod scorched, her body bruised, her soul emptied and reborn. The crew gathered around her as she emerged, silent and sunstruck. She didn't explain right away. Couldn't. Instead, she walked to the center of the colony's main square and placed the final transmission from the Lucian into the Com Tower's archive. Lyra's voice rang out across every human colony that still had ears to hear. They came to erase us. We answered with fire. We answered with memory. We answered by becoming something more than human. We became story. Across the system, solar relays picked up the message. It burned its way into every ship, every outpost, every survivor's heart. A declaration. Humanity endures not because it conquers, but because it remembers, and Learushi would never be forgotten. Weeks passed. Then, unexpectedly, it came. A signal. Not from Earth, not from the Luminari, from the deep, an entirely new frequency, resonant, melodic, laced with emotional code. The first message was simple. We saw your son. The second followed soon after. We felt your grief. And then, teach us how to remember. Mara stared at the comms log. Breath caught in her throat. The galaxy was listening now. Because one woman, one engineer with fire in her mind and love in her voice had chosen to burn brighter than the stars. Mara stepped outside into the colony courtyard and looked up. The night sky stretched endlessly above her, filled with constellations both familiar and new. But one point of light burned more brightly than the rest. A golden star, artificial, forged in death, fed by memory, the place where Lyra lived now, forever. She smiled through tears. You did it, she whispered. You lit the dark. She turned to her crew, voice rising. Prepare the ships. We're not hiding anymore. We're going to teach the stars who we are. And across the galaxy, humanity rose not with weapons, but with story, with fire, with love. 1,000 ships took to the stars. Not to fight but to be remembered. The Luminari didn't vanish. They watched. They learned. And somewhere, drifting through the ruins of Sol, a single sun burned brighter than any that came before, because she had loved, because she had chosen, because her name was Lyra, and she remembered.